Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. Chapter 1: Horus' Betrayal. When lightning struck, it rippled through space and time, causing a faint vibration that went unnoticed by any machine. In that fleeting moment, an unlucky student was caught in its path, and their soul was swept into the narrow rift created by the lightning. Joe was struck down, his life abruptly ended. Yet, his soul slipped through the fragile seam between dimensions, traversing the gap of space and time to arrive in another world. His journey was beyond comprehension, a chaotic blur akin to being torn from reality itself. But Joe's tale was only one fragment of the storm. Far beyond the bounds of his new existence, a betrayal of unimaginable proportions unfolded. When the news first broke, no one believed it. It was like thunder without rain, a distant, impossible sound. That disbelief shattered when the weapons of former allies roared, their aim turned toward the heart of mankind, Terra itself. Only then did they understand the unthinkable had happened. War Master Horus had betrayed the Emperor of mankind. For those who heard it, the betrayal was a scar on their souls. Horus was not just any leader, he was the most trusted of the Emperor's primarchs. During the Great Crusade, it was he who carried the Emperor's banner, bringing victory after victory to the Imperium of Man. His name was synonymous with triumph, his loyalty seemingly unshakable. Yet now, that same name struck fear and fury into the hearts of those who once praised it. Horus's treachery wasn't a solitary act. Half of the Emperor's elite Space Marine legions, once paragons of loyalty and honor, turned their backs on humanity. Corrupted by the whispers of chaos, their souls were twisted into instruments of destruction. They turned their formidable guns, once used to protect humanity, toward its annihilation. They marched under Horus's banner with one goal: to overthrow the Emperor and enslave humanity to the ruinous powers. The betrayal was obscene. These warriors had been the pride of humanity, the Emperor's finest. They sailed across the galaxy on starships, landing on alien worlds to crush brutal xenos and bloodthirsty abominations. They were the Emperor's blade, honed to perfection and wielded to carve out humanity's place in the stars. And now, that blade had turned against its master, aiming to pierce the heart of mankind. Amidst this chaos stood Kayvaan, a veteran of countless battles, his power armor bearing the scars of war. A captain of the Raven Guard, Kayvaan Shrike's weapons were Raven's talons, lethal lightning claws integrated into his gauntlets. Sharp, electrified, and unyielding, they were extensions of his will. As he drove the claws into an enemy's helmet, blood sprayed out in a violent arc. A pulse of blue electricity crackled, reducing flesh and bone to ash. The smell of charred remains filled the air, mingling with the acrid tang of blood. Kayvaan had seen it all before. Death had become a rhythm, as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. The bloodshed was relentless. The Imperium's defenses were crumbling under Horus's relentless assault. The once unthinkable had come to pass. The War Master's genius in warfare, once humanity's greatest asset, was now its doom. Horus's legions had reached Terra. The Imperial Palace was under siege, and humanity bled. Yet even as exhaustion pulled at his body, Kayvaan refused to yield. With a roar, he kicked a corpse into the oncoming enemy ranks, sending bodies sprawling like broken puppets. His power armor hummed with energy as he jumped forward, his claws carving through flesh and ceramite with brutal efficiency. Blood mist filled the air as Kayvaan tore through his enemies. He moved like a shadow, swift and merciless, a reaper in ornate black armor. Each strike of the raven's talons was precise, fatal. No foe could stand before him for more than a heartbeat. He was one of the Raven Guard's deadliest warriors, second only to their primarch, Corvus Corax, in close combat. He was death incarnate, unflinching and unstoppable. But even his unmatched skill couldn't shift the tide. The battlefield was awash in chaos. Space Marines, who had once fought side by side, now slaughtered each other. The bonds of brotherhood forged over centuries had been twisted into hatred and betrayal. Horus's tactical brilliance was unmatched, and he wielded it like a scalpel to tear apart the Imperium's defenses. The horrors didn't end with the traitorous Space Marines. Among the corpses and blood-soaked ground, the enemy performed their vile rituals. The air shimmered with unholy energy, and grotesque demons began to emerge. Mutated beasts, snarling and feral, charged into the fray alongside corrupted Space Marines, their howls blending into a cacophony of rage. Kayvaan Shrike swung the talons in swift, calculated arcs, cutting down enemies with ease. His calm demeanor masked the grim reality: there were simply too many foes. No matter how many he felled, the enemy seemed invincible, their numbers unending. The battle was going poorly. No, it was worse than that, it was desperate. The Imperial Palace's defenses faced relentless assaults. In the distance, the Lion's Gate spaceport had fallen almost instantly. The enemy had secured an ideal landing point, and now their forces poured in like an unrelenting tide. From the chaos, Kayvaan heard a familiar roar from afar, for the Emperor. The cry was deep, powerful, and carried a mix of sorrow and resolve. It was the battle cry of his brothers in the Raven Guard. The brothers who had fought shoulder to shoulder with him were reaching their limit. Their rallying cries weren't just words, they were declarations of defiance, meant to bolster their resolve in the face of annihilation. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Victory was no longer within reach. All that remained was to face death with honor. The battlefield was a maelstrom of chaos. Above, the skies were streaked with lines of light, not stars, but tracer rounds from countless anti-aircraft weapons firing relentlessly. The ground shook as these weapons launched torrents of ammunition skyward, weaving together a deadly rain that defied gravity, shooting from earth to sky. Beyond the clouds, the battle raged in space. The deafening booms from above were not thunder but the unending exchange of artillery fire between warships. High above Terra's orbit, fleets clashed in brutal combat, firing volley after volley in a merciless duel. Warship against warship, cannon against cannon, there was no finesse, only raw firepower. It was a contest of attrition, a brutal test of which side could endure longer. Explosions lit up the heavens as massive warships were torn apart, their shattered hulks descending toward the planet. These falling behemoths, burning as they entered the atmosphere, looked like enormous meteors streaking across the sky. Occasionally, a battered ship would steer its final descent into the enemy's positions. Inside one such doomed vessel, a helmsman, miraculously still alive, shouted one last time, for the Emperor, before slamming into the enemy ranks. Even such acts of heroism could not turn the tide. The enemy surged forward like a tidal wave, overwhelming all resistance. Despair loomed large as Kayvaan fought his way toward the source of the earlier battle cries. He hoped to reach his brothers, to aid them, even if only a few remained. But pushing forward through a sea of enemies felt like swimming against a river of blood. Soon, the cries fell silent. When he finally glanced toward their source, his fears were confirmed: his brothers had fallen. Chapter 2, Primarch Sanguinius Kayvaan felt no sadness, only pride. His brothers had died gloriously, fighting for the Emperor, a death worth honoring. He knew his turn would come soon. For the Raven Guard, there was no retreat. If victory was impossible, then death was their only fate. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently. In the distance, a towering figure emerged from the enemy ranks, an immense war machine that radiated despair. Kayvaan's heart sank. He recognized it immediately, a traitor titan. Once the most fearsome weapon of the Imperium, it had become a symbol of betrayal. The Emperor's hammer, now turned against his loyal soldiers. Kayvaan sighed deeply. Damn it. It's a titan. He shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Fall back. Ravens, retreat and reform the line 100 meters back. Brother Aizen, call for heavy weapon support. Protect the Emperor at all costs. May the Emperor bless us. His brothers echoed his cry, may the Emperor bless us. Their voices carried determination, but the Titan's shadow loomed ever closer. The Titan was a monstrosity. Standing well over 30 meters tall, its immense frame moved like an ancient, mechanical god of war. Its weapons, massive Vulcan megabolters, jutted from its shoulders, each barrel larger than the average soldier. As it advanced, its arsenal unleashed a storm of firepower that tore through everything in its path. The ground erupted beneath the relentless barrage. Solid earth rippled like water under the Titan's devastating assault. Chariots, artillery, and bunkers were obliterated, flung into the air like discarded toys. The defense line disintegrated in moments, reduced to smoldering ruins. The Titan was a relic of the dark age of technology, the pinnacle of humanity's military engineering. Now, it was the harbinger of despair. Its towering frame seemed invincible, its firepower unstoppable. It crushed all resistance beneath its mechanical feet and rained death from above with ruthless efficiency. Kayvaan Shrike made his decision in an instant. For the Emperor. He roared, dragging his claws as he charged at the towering Titan. At that moment, the deep thuds of mortars echoed across the battlefield. Kayvaan's call had worked, the artillery in the rear had finally taken notice of the massive Titan. Shells shrieked through the air, crashing into the mechanical colossus. Explosions erupted, filling the sky with fire and thunder. But the devastation was absorbed by an invisible barrier surrounding the Titan, a void shield. Damn it, it's a void shield. Keep firing, drain its energy. Someone shouted over the comms. Titans weren't just weapons, they were fortresses on legs. With layers of heavy armor and void shields, advanced energy barriers usually reserved for capital warships, Titans were nearly invincible. For ground forces, encountering one was akin to facing a walking nightmare. Despite the barrage, the Titan remained unscathed. The artillery crews, unwilling to waste all their munitions in one place, began shifting their aim beyond the massive machine, leaving it unharmed. But Kayvaan didn't stop. He dashed forward at full speed, leaping onto an enemy traitor marine who tried to block his path. With the sheer power of his power armor and his enhanced body, Kayvaan drove the man's head into his chest with a single stomp. Using the momentum, he pushed off the mangled body, soaring higher. This time, he reached the Titan's waist. Seizing the opportunity, Kayvaan jammed his raven's talons into the Titan's armor, clinging to it like a steel insect on a giant. The enemy commander's voice blared angrily through the comms, and within seconds, all nearby guns turned their attention to Kayvaan. A hailstorm of explosive rounds and energy beams rained down, the sky lit with destructive power. "Captain Shrike, watch out!" Selena's panicked voice crackled over the channel. Yet Kayvaan remained calm. The Titan's own void shield flared to life, blocking the incoming fire. It was almost ironic, the shield meant to protect the Titan was now shielding him instead. "It's the void shield," Aizen murmured, watching the scene in disbelief. For a moment, he'd thought his captain was doomed, but then it hit him. Of course, the void shield didn't distinguish between friend or foe. It simply repelled anything that threatened the Titan. Kayvaan kept climbing, undeterred. His raven's talons flashed faintly with energy as he drove them into the armor, pulling himself upward, one hand at a time. Step by step, he scaled the giant machine. He reached the Titan's head, where its command deck was housed. Kayvaan cut into the armor, peeling back the command deck's shell like the rind of a fruit. Inside, 3 terrified faces stared back at him. How is this possible?" one of them stammered, his voice trembling. Kayvaan didn't give him a chance to say more. He lunged into the cabin, his claws flashing. In an instant, the occupants were reduced to mangled remains. From her position on the ground, Selena watched in stunned silence as the massive titan froze in place. "It stopped. It's down," she gasped. Without its crew, the titan became a lifeless hulk, a monument to its former power. The battlefield erupted with cheers. Kayvaan's single-handed takedown of the titan sent a wave of hope and exhilaration through the ranks. But the celebration was short-lived. The ground trembled. A low, ominous rumble grew louder with every passing second. Emerging from the smoke on the horizon were more titans, their colossal forms blotting out the sky. They advanced in a slow, relentless line, each step shaking the earth like a drumbeat of despair. 1, 2, 11, 12. "There are too many," Aizen whispered, his voice trembling. This is impossible. We can't stop them." Kayvaan stood on the shoulder of the titan he had just killed, gazing silently at the approaching army. He couldn't blame Aizen for being scared. The young man had been his apprentice for 5 years, and Kayvaan knew him well. Aizen was no coward. He had the heart of a warrior, determined and unyielding. But even the bravest could falter in the face of such overwhelming odds. Victory was no longer possible. All that remained was the chance for an honorable death. Kayvaan sighed, bracing himself for what was to come. Before he could act, a voice cut through the battlefield like a divine proclamation. "Warriors, you have fought valiantly. I have seen your courage, your strength. On behalf of the Emperor, I thank you. You have done enough. Now, step back. Leave the rest to me." The voice came from the outer wall, where the massive gate stood. A figure stepped forward, noble and radiant, like a god descending from the heavens. Every soldier on the battlefield knew who it was. Sanguinius, the angelic primarch, stood tall, his presence alone igniting hope in their hearts. Sanguinius stood at the center of the battlefield like a radiant beacon, his golden armor gleaming even in the shadows cast by the chaos around him. Behind him, a pair of immaculate white wings spread wide, shimmering with an otherworldly glow. He gripped a massive sword, its edge reflecting the light of the blood-red skies, and stood proudly before the colossal gate. His chin lifted slightly as he gazed at the overwhelming horde of enemies, his expression calm yet disdainful. It wasn't arrogance, it was the quiet confidence of a warrior who knew his enemies were unworthy. These were oath-breakers and traitors, beings who had abandoned their beliefs. To Sanguinius, they deserved no respect. Chapter 3, Joe and Kayvaan. The tide of the battle had turned the moment he arrived. The Emperor's legions, who had been on the verge of collapse, rallied under his presence. The soldiers stationed on the outer walls began retreating into the fortress in an orderly fashion, regaining their composure and discipline. As the fortress gates creaked shut, Sanguinius stood alone before them, a solitary figure against an ocean of foes. He held the line, his sword carving through demons and chaos space marines alike. No enemy could stand against him for even a moment. With each swing of his blood-streaked blade, waves of foes fell. His white wings beat powerfully, sending gusts of wind that scattered debris and smoke. As golden light spilled from his feathers, it swept over the battlefield like sacred dust. Those touched by its glow, whether corrupted spirits or mortal traitors, burst into holy flames, their screams lost amidst the cacophony of war. Enemy ranks disintegrated into writhing torches before they could even approach him. Sanguinius wielded his sword with effortless grace, often using only one hand. The blade shimmered with an eternal golden light, untarnished even by the blood of his foes. Each horizontal slash cleaved through enemies within a 50-meter radius, the sheer force of his strikes cutting through air, ceramite, and flesh alike. Yet no matter how many fell, more came, their corpses forming a grisly path as the next wave surged forward. Still, Sanguinius stood unyielding. The ground trembled under the weight of their numbers, but he held firm, A singular force defying countless adversaries. Unseen amidst the chaos, Kayvaan Shrike fought alongside him. Clad in black power armor, he moved like a shadow among the enemy ranks. If Sanguinius was the blinding sun, Kayvaan was the silent specter cast by its light. Using Sanguinius as a distraction, he darted through the chaos unnoticed, his movements precise and calculated. His raven's talons struck without warning, each kill swift and lethal. The enemy only became aware of his presence when it was too late, when his blades had already pierced their throats or hearts. While Sanguinius tore through the enemy head-on, Kayvaan hunted those who posed a genuine threat. He targeted powerful demons and infamous traitor Space Marine champions, eliminating them before they could reach Sanguinius. Though the Primarch could handle such adversaries, Kayvaan's intervention spared him the effort, allowing Sanguinius to focus on holding the line. These key eliminations sowed disarray among the enemy forces, leaving them leaderless and disorganized. Chaos erupted within their ranks, their blind aggression turning them into fodder for the fortress's cannons and crossfire. Above the din of battle, Sanguinius smiled faintly. The golden light radiating from his armor grew even brighter, drawing the gaze of friend and foe alike. Under his radiant cover, Kayvaan moved even faster, striking with relentless efficiency. He disrupted enemy formations, assassinated commanders, and crushed their attempts at organization. As a result, the assault became a disjointed mess. Demons and traitors alike were cut down by the fortress's defenses or shredded by Sanguinius's unrelenting blade. The tide began to turn. Cannons roared from the fortress, halting the advance of the enemy's Titan legions. The combined efforts of Sanguinius and Kayvaan bought the Emperor's forces precious time. For an entire hour, the pair stood against the overwhelming horde, holding Chaos's gate without faltering. Only when the fortress's gates finally closed behind them did Sanguinius lower his sword. He turned to the sealed gate, smiling softly. "The battle is far from over," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "Rest, my warriors. The war has only just begun." As Sanguinius turned to retreat into the fortress, a sudden beam of light pierced the battlefield. It streaked across the chaos, cutting through flesh, ceramite, and stone. Sensing the danger, Sanguinius turned, his wings flaring as he tried to evade. But in that instant, a powerful force seized him, locking his body in place. A malevolent will coiled around him, paralyzing him with its sheer presence. The beam surged toward him, unstoppable and deadly. Yet before it could strike, a shadow leaped into its path. Kayvaan, without hesitation, placed himself between the attack and his Primarch. The beam struck him directly, the force of it tearing into his armor and raking across his soul. Pain unlike anything he had ever known flooded his senses, but he did not falter. For a fleeting moment, Kayvaan's vision blurred. He felt something cold and invasive seep into his body, a dark force threatening to consume him from within. Yet even in his agony, he stood firm, his sacrifice a testament to his unyielding loyalty. Victory, victory, or. Those were the last words Joe said, his voice trembling with confusion, leaving Sanguinius utterly baffled. On the other side of the battlefield, Horus slowly lowered his hand, his face dark with frustration. This curse, guaranteed to strike its intended target, had somehow rebounded, hitting an unintended bystander instead. The misfire forced him to make minor adjustments to the grand plan he had so carefully crafted. Yet, after a moment of seething silence, a sly smile carved its way across his face, as flawless as marble. Perhaps this was fate's way of proving his supremacy. Maybe destiny itself was paving the path to show that Horus was not only more powerful but also a more perfect existence than the Emperor. Meanwhile, in an entirely different space, Kayvaan sat on a cold metal chair, his stern gaze locked on the young man before him. His expression held a mix of suspicion and faint irritation. "Have you seen enough?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Standing across from him was Joe, a regular teenager from another world. He wore light blue jeans and a plain white t-shirt. His posture was stiff, his gaze darting nervously around the strange environment. The towering man's question caught him off guard, but he managed a stammered reply. Where am I? What were those things I just saw? Calm down, young man, Kayvaan said, his voice steady, carrying a hoarse but reassuring weight. This is the first lesson I'll teach you. Don't panic. Stay composed. If there's a problem, solve it one step at a time. Joe closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them again, determined to make sense of the situation. The room remained the same, an enormous, otherworldly library. Towering bookcases stretched endlessly into the sky and outward in all directions, creating a maze of ancient knowledge. At the heart of it all stood a simple steel chair occupied by the imposing figure of Kayvaan. Even sitting down, Kayvaan was impossibly tall, at least 3 meters in height. He dwarfed the tallest athletes Joe had ever seen on Hollywood's. All right, Joe said cautiously, steadying his voice. No panicking. Let's start with the basics. Who are you? I am Kayvaan, the giant man replied, his tone firm but not unkind. A captain of the Raven Guard and a loyal servant of the Emperor. His gaze sharpened, his expression a mix of approval and critique. You're quick to regain composure. Impressive, for an ordinary person. But as a soldier? You'd be woefully inadequate. Joe furrowed his brow. I don't understand half of what you're saying, but fine. Next question, where am I, and how do I get home? Chapter 4, Study hard, you're in my consciousness, Kayvaan explained, gesturing with one massive hand. The air shimmered, and suddenly, the world transformed. In the blink of an eye, the maze of books became a vast expanse of stars. A moment later, they stood in an ancient fortress surrounded by stone walls and flickering torches. Just as quickly, they returned to the library. Joe's mouth hung open in shock. His breath hitched as he tried to process what had just happened. This is insane. It's like the Matrix. Are we in some kind of simulation? Don't compare this to that shallow, overrated story, Kayvaan said with a scoff. Everything you've seen is real, not a computer-generated illusion. You are in my mind, within my spiritual world. Joe blinked. Wait, you know about the Matrix? How do you even know that? Aren't you? I don't know. Not from Terra? For a second there, I thought I'd been teleported to some other dimension or something. But if you know about the Matrix, then, thank the Emperor, I'm still on Terra, right? Kayvaan's expression softened into a faint smirk. If you define Terra strictly by its name, then yes, we are on Terra. But this is not the Terra you remember. In your terms, you could say you've traveled. This world is entirely different from the one you knew. Joe's eyes widened. Wait, what? If this isn't my Terra, how do you know about the Matrix? What, do Hollywood's broadcast across dimensions or something? Kayvaan let out a low chuckle. Do you think you've only been here for a few moments? To you, it might feel like you simply blacked out and woke up in my mind. But in reality, you've been here for thousands of years. I've had plenty of time to study your memories. By the 300th year, I was bored enough to sift through everything in your head. I know everything you know, right down to the trivial details you've long forgotten. Joe staggered back a step, his face pale. You've looked through my memories? The thought was horrifying. It felt like standing naked in front of a crowd, utterly exposed. So you know everything about me? Kayvaan leaned forward slightly, his massive frame casting an imposing shadow. Everything. I know your origins, the peaceful world you came from. I know about your mundane but precious life. But don't feel singled out, our souls are intertwined now. Just as you have no secrets from me, I have none from you. Joe's mind raced, grasping for something familiar to ground himself. Wait, he said suddenly, what about that battle I saw earlier? What was that all about? Kayvaan's lips curled into a knowing smile. Ah, that. was just the beginning. Ah, you're talking about the Battle of the Eternity Gate, Joe said, frowning as he finished speaking. The words had come out naturally, almost instinctively, even though he had no idea what the Battle of the Eternity Gate was. It felt like the phrase had surfaced from a place he couldn't explain. Yes, the Battle of the Eternity Gate, Kayvaan confirmed, his massive figure looming like a mountain. It's a good sign that you know those words. It seems you're starting to tap into my memories, even if you don't realize it yet. That battle was the last one I ever fought. What you saw in your visions wasn't a movie or some ridiculous dream, it was real. That battle actually happened. In it, I fought to protect Sanguinius from a powerful attack. I know, Joe replied, his voice subdued. I saw it, or, no, it's more than that. I felt it. He rubbed his temple, trying to explain. The word saw doesn't even begin to describe it. It was like I became you, like I was standing on that battlefield as Kayvaan. Every moment, every sensation, was so vivid. I don't just remember it, I understand it, down to my core. He hesitated, then asked, Sanguinius. Was he your friend? Why would you go so far as to shield him with your body, even your life? Kayvaan's expression softened, though his tone remained calm. No, there was no friendship between us. Sanguinius and I served the Imperium in entirely different capacities. We never spoke, never met before that battle. I only knew of him by reputation, a glorious name, nothing more. Joe furrowed his brow, struggling to understand. Then why? Why sacrifice yourself for someone you didn't even know? Kayvaan's lips curved into a faint smile as he explained, because he was extraordinary. Sanguinius was not just powerful, he was the most powerful and noble of all the Emperor's sons. Protecting him wasn't about personal connection, it was about ensuring that he could protect the Emperor. My role in that moment wasn't to survive, it was to guarantee that the Imperium's most valuable defender could continue to fight. Joe blinked, astonished. That's it? Just that? That's it, Kayvaan said, shaking his head at Joe's incredulous expression. You look like you can't believe it, but understand this, the battle we fought wasn't one where survival was guaranteed. By the end, those who lived likely owed their fate more to luck than skill. But don't interrupt me now, listen carefully. At the climax of that battle, I was struck by a powerful force. It wasn't something of this world. It was a curse, a manifestation of the warp, a kind of dark magic, if you will. And somehow, your soul was carried into my body along with that cursed energy. Joe's mind flashed back to the battlefield memory, recalling the moment Kayvaan had stepped in front of Sanguinius, shielding him from a fatal beam of energy. Wait. You're saying I followed that beam of light and ended up inside your body? Yes, Kayvaan confirmed with a solemn nod. At first, I thought you were some trick of the ruinous powers, maybe even a new and terrifying weapon. After all, you came into me riding on the very force that cursed me. I waited for you to wake up, planning to face you in a battle of will and soul to see who would triumph. But... He shrugged. You slept. And you slept too long. By the 300th year, I'd grown bored. I started digging through your memories and realized you weren't some enemy trick. You were just an unlucky victim. An ordinary person from another dimension, caught up in events you couldn't control. Joe's mouth felt dry. I see. So now that I'm awake, what happens next? Kayvaan leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over Joe. Now, it's not about what you and I want to do. It's about what must be done. Don't worry, I won't harm you. Instead, I'll teach you. I'll teach you everything I know. You'll have to study hard and give it your all, because your survival depends on it. Joe frowned, confused. I don't think I follow. The curse that hit me in the Battle of the Eternity Gate didn't just wound me, Kayvaan explained. It trapped my soul inside my body. I can't die, but I'm not alive either. My body is a cage for my soul, and the efforts of my comrades to save me only prolonged this cursed existence. Over time, My soul will weaken until it's gone. When that happens, you," he pointed at Joe, "will be the only one left in this body. I don't know what that means for you. Will you be imprisoned here, unable to act? Or will you wake fully, taking over? Either way, it's not something you should look forward to." Chapter 5, A Curse? Joe rubbed his forehead, his thoughts jumbled. "So, let me get this straight. You're saying you're going to die, and I'll take over your body. And you're teaching me now so I can carry on in your place? Serve your emperor or whatever?" "Exactly. But no matter what happens, you're saying it's a bad deal for me? Whether I stay trapped or end up serving your emperor, it's all unfortunate?" "It's not just an emperor as you imagine him," Kayvaan said firmly. "Not some mortal ruler sitting on a throne. The emperor of mankind is humanity's savior, our leader, our prophet. His power surpasses all gods. Without him, humanity would have been extinguished long ago. It is because of the God Emperor that humanity still survives in this galaxy teeming with horrors." Joe shrugged, unconvinced. "All right, your emperor then. I get it. But back to my question, why would serving him be just as unlucky as being trapped?" "This is no easy task," Kayvaan said with a weary but prideful smile etched on his face. "If you venture out in the future, you'll understand. As an Adeptus Astartes, a space marine, we are powerful, perfect, and granted eternal purpose, but such gifts come with unimaginable sacrifices." Joe froze, momentarily caught off guard, before shaking his head with a chuckle. "Are you serious? Why should I follow your orders like some puppet?" Kayvaan's smile vanished, replaced by a chilling calmness. "Because you're an outsider. You need to understand that with a mere thought, I could make you disappear in unimaginable agony." With that, he snapped his fingers. Instantly, Joe crumpled to the ground, his body convulsing as excruciating pain tore through him. "I can make you feel torment beyond your wildest nightmares," Kayvaan said coldly, watching Joe writhe. "So, it would be wise to learn respect and obedience. Now, get up. You've already squandered 1,000 years, there's no time left to waste. Your first task is to read every book in this hall." Meanwhile, time also passed outside. How could this happen? Aizen's voice trembled as he stared in disbelief at the ceramite coffin before him. His captain, the one he had revered above all, now lay within it, a shadow of his former self. Anger surged through him, burning hot in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I need an explanation, one that makes sense. Otherwise." The servitor standing nearby trembled visibly, its mechanical arm twitching at its side. I don't know either. This is unprecedented. The captain shouldn't have changed after being placed in the sanctum, but please wait a moment. This might have happened during the Great Betrayal or shortly thereafter. I'll need to check the records." Before the servitor could move, an elderly man stepped out from the shadows of the hall. "No need, Koraida. You're not authorized to access those records," the man said, his voice steady but firm. He waved a dismissive hand, and Koraida quickly retreated. The old man approached Aizen, bowing slightly as a sign of respect. "Lord Aizen, I am Eustace, librarian of the Sanctum of the Honored Dead. I oversee everything here. How may I assist you?" Aizen's gaze remained fixed on the coffin. "I want to know what happened to the person lying inside. How did he end up like this?" Eustace glanced briefly at the identification sigil engraved on the ceramite coffin. "May I ask your connection to the captain in question?" Aizen didn't hesitate. "He was my captain. He always will be." Understanding dawned on the librarian's face. He let his gaze drift to the chest of Aizen's armor, adorned with medals that gleamed in the hall's soft light, the imperial laurel, the crux terminatus, and the mark of the emperor's wrath. Each one represented extraordinary feats, victories against insurmountable odds, triumphs in legendary battles, and countless foes vanquished. It was no wonder the servitor had quaked in the presence of such a figure. If your captain could see what you've become, he would be proud, Eustace said softly. But I must ask you to temper your anger and lower your voice. This is the sanctum of the honored dead, after all. Aizen nodded, fully aware of the solemnity and unyielding rules that governed this sanctified space. The sanctum of the honored dead was no ordinary hall, it was a sacred reliquary of the chapter's most revered heroes, those who had given everything in service to the Emperor. These were warriors who had slain Xeno's lords, turned the tide of impossible battles, or laid down their lives in acts of supreme sacrifice. The remains of these heroes lay interred in stasis sarcophagi, their surfaces adorned with purity seals, etched litanies, and the sigils of their chapter. The walls of the hall stretched into shadowed infinity, each recess containing a crypt illuminated by the dim glow of flickering votive candles. Some sarcophagi bore the honored crux terminatus, signifying those who had once donned Terminator armor. Others were marked with laurels of champions or the battle honors of campaigns long past. For these heroes, death was inevitable, whether from insurmountable wounds or mortal injuries sustained in battle, but their loss was too great for the Imperium to bear. Their talents, their wisdom, and even their genetic legacy were treasures the Imperium could not afford to lose. Thus, the sanctum of the honored dead was established. These sarcophagi weren't mere resting places, they were advanced stasis chambers connected to a colossal temporal stabilizer. Time flowed so slowly for the occupants that they were nearly frozen in an eternal slumber. The hope was that one day, when the Imperium's technology advanced far enough, these heroes could be revived and restored. Eustace pulled out a data slate, its surface lighting up with glowing text and symbols. He scanned the information carefully before speaking again. You have the right to know about your captain's condition. However, I must warn you that this involves highly classified information. It is one of the Imperium's most closely guarded secrets. I trust you understand the importance of discretion. Aizen's expression hardened. I understand. Good. Eustace tapped the data slate, bringing up a specific document. He held it out toward Aizen. Take a look here, pay close attention to this seal. Aizen's gaze followed Eustace's pointing finger, and his jaw dropped instantly. He stood frozen, his mouth agape for what felt like an eternity. This battle-hardened hero, who had once stood unshaken against hundreds of Chaos Space Marines, now wore an expression he had not shown in thousands of years, pure, unfiltered astonishment. The sight left Aizen speechless. The librarian waited patiently, allowing Aizen a moment to collect himself. Once Aizen regained some composure, the librarian continued, his tone grave yet steady. What you see before you is a seal of the Emperor's will, placed by the hand of the Emperor himself. Your captain, the revered Kayvaan, was personally examined by His Omniscient Majesty. It was his divine revelation that your captain's wounds were not merely physical but were inflicted by a curse of the most sinister kind. A curse? Aizen's voice trembled slightly as the word sent a chill through him. He struggled to process what he had just heard. I don't understand. I was with my captain on the battlefield during that campaign. Afterward, they told me he was gravely injured, but no one ever mentioned a curse. Chapter 6. Slanesh. That's because such knowledge was classified, Eustace explained, his tone patient yet firm. The information had a strict time lock. 50 years ago, you wouldn't have had the clearance to know about this. But times have changed. As he spoke, Eustace tapped the panel in his hand. The ceramite sarcophagus in front of them began to rise slowly, its shimmering surface shifting and transforming until it became transparent like reinforced adamantium glass. Inside, Captain Kayvaan's body was now fully visible, displayed in unsettling clarity. Look closely, Eustace said, gesturing toward the body. Since his remains were entrusted to the sanctum of the honored dead, some changes have occurred. However, one thing remains consistent. There are no visible external injuries on his body. What felled Captain Shrike was neither blood loss nor terminal disease. Not an ordinary attack either. In fact, The scars from his many battles, the ones that once adorned his body, are fading away. What you see now is a body so smooth and unblemished, it could belong to an idle noble rather than a warrior of countless battles. And perhaps most troubling of all, his body has been shrinking over the past millennium. Shrinking? Aizen echoed in disbelief. The word sounded absurd, but looking at the figure in the transparent sarcophagus, he had to admit it was an apartment description. Kayvaan had once been an imposing figure, standing at over 2.9 meters tall in his power armor. This giant-like stature was standard among the Adeptus Astartes, where even the smallest initiates towered over ordinary humans. Space Marines were more than just soldiers, they were living weapons, engineered for war. Each Marine underwent brutal genetic enhancements and numerous surgeries. Their bones became as hard as steel, they were equipped with multi-lobed hearts for greater stamina and redundant organs to ensure survival. Beneath their skin lay a subdermal carapace tougher than adamantium plate. These warriors were built to endure the harshest conditions in the galaxy. Yet now, his old captain, the most formidable fighter of the Raven Guard, master of shadows, and a legend in close combat, was reduced to this frail state. Kayvaan's once scarred body, a testament to his countless victories, had become eerily smooth. It was like the canvas of his life had been wiped clean, his glorious scars replaced by an unsettling perfection. "He's barely 2 meters tall now," Aizen whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The transformation was both disturbing and heartbreaking. Eustace nodded gravely and began recounting the events. During the Horus Heresy, War Master Horus succumbed to the temptations of the Chaos Gods and betrayed the Emperor. The 4 Dark Gods, Slaanesh, Khorne, Tsinch, and Nurgle, bestowed their blessings and power upon him. Among these blessings were 2 devastating curses. One was a lethal curse aimed at Sanguinius, the Emperor's most noble and beloved son. As long as Sanguinius stood, the Emperor's rule was unshakable. The second was a powerful curse intended for the Emperor himself. But fate did not favor Horus as much as he had hoped. At the most critical moment, your captain, Lord Kayvaan, stepped forward and shielded Sanguinius with his own body. The curse from Slaanesh, which was supposed to strike Sanguinius, was deflected. We all know what followed. Now that you understand this, you should recognize the magnitude of your captain's sacrifice. The survival of the Emperor, and humanity itself, rests heavily on what he endured. Without him, the outcome of the heresy could have been very different. Aizen was stunned. Of course, he knew the rest of the story. At the rebellion's climax, the Emperor and Sanguinius had stormed Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. Sanguinius confronted Horus first but was struck down in a brutal battle, his perfect form broken by the War Master's overwhelming might. The Emperor, in turn, engaged Horus and ultimately emerged victorious, though at a great cost. Severely wounded, the Emperor had been confined to the Golden Throne ever since, a life support system that kept him alive but unable to fully recover. To this day, the Emperor remains bound to the Golden Throne, his undying will sustaining the Imperium at the cost of his own mortal shell. His state is a paradox, too vital to the survival of humanity to lose, yet too broken to truly live. For the faithful, he is the God Emperor, a divine beacon; for others, he is a reminder of the Imperium's endless sacrifice. Even in deathless stasis, his light guides the galaxy, much like the relics of ancient saints enshrined in the Sanctum Sanctorum, revered yet forever entombed. Aizen's heart ached at the thought. If my captain hadn't stepped in, Sanguinius might have survived the curse, but the Emperor might not have. And with Horus standing before him, there's no telling how the battle would have ended. But why? Aizen hesitated, struggling to find the words. Why didn't my captain succumb to the curse like Sanguinius did? He wasn't twisted, or broken, or, you're asking why he didn't meet the same fate, Eustace interrupted, his tone calm but grave. Sanguinius was tortured to death by Khorne's rage, yet your captain lies here peacefully. Is that what you're wondering? Yes, Aizen admitted awkwardly. It's just. It was a curse from an evil god. Even if my captain was incredibly strong, Sanguinius was the best of us, and even he couldn't endure Korn's curse. How did my captain survive Slaaneshes? Eustace sighed. The curses came from different chaos gods, each with their own nature. Korn is the god of violence and slaughter, and his power manifests as unrelenting pain and rage. Even Sanguinius, with all his strength, could not withstand it. Slaanesh, however, is the god of excess and corruption. Slaanesh's methods are more insidious, more subtle. Your captain didn't fall immediately, but make no mistake, he's not safe. Slaanesh's curse transformed Lord Kayvaan body into a prison and his soul into its captive. The curse slowly weakens his physical form and corrodes his spirit. Even the stasis field preserving him cannot stop this process. One day, Lord Kayvaan will either awaken briefly, only to succumb, or he will quietly pass away. Either way, the warrior he was will be no more. Aizen's fists clenched, his voice trembling with anger. That's despicable. He could barely contain his rage. Warriors like my captain, like all of us, aren't afraid to die in battle. We welcome it. To die in combat, giving everything for the Emperor, is the ultimate honor. But to waste away in a sarcophagus, unable to fight, that's a fate worse than death. It's a mockery of everything we stand for. Chapter 7, Different of World. Deep within Kayvaan's spirit, a different scene played out. Joe sat in the ethereal world of pure thought, surrounded by shelves filled with Kayvaan's memories. Here, every event of Kayvaan's life existed as a book. Whenever Joe opened one, he opened a window into Kayvaan's past. The human mind is a strange thing. Knowledge is never truly lost, it's simply misplaced, hidden in a labyrinth of thought. In this spiritual realm, Joe had access to it all. With nothing else to do in this timeless space, Joe spent his days reading. At first, he delved into books about the galaxy and its history, driven by curiosity about this strange new place. He didn't know if he'd ever wake up in Kayvaan's body, but if he did, he wanted to understand the galaxy he'd find himself in. The books were written in beautiful but unfamiliar characters. Strangely, though he couldn't recognize the script, the knowledge flowed into him effortlessly, as if the words spoke directly to his soul. Each page revealed wonders, horrors, and complexities of a universe far beyond his imagination. Through Kayvaan's memories, Joe explored a new galaxy, and in doing so, began to see his own existence in a different light. If humanity in Joe's original world was like a toddler just learning to walk, then in this universe, humanity had grown into a war-hardened veteran, bearing the scars of endless trials. In Joe's world, human civilization had barely scratched the surface, boasting only 5,000 years of recorded history. But here, humanity carried the weight of a staggering 40,000 years of existence. Such an overwhelming span of time, brimming with triumphs and tragedies, made Joe marvel at its gravity. In this galaxy, humanity had once been the dominant force. During its golden age, humans unlocked the secrets of warp navigation, enabling them to traverse vast distances at unimaginable speeds. Their colonies stretched across the stars, spreading the mark of humanity throughout the galaxy. Yet this golden age was short-lived. The universe soon revealed its horrors. A catastrophic series of warp storms swept across the galaxy, severing the vital pathways of interstellar travel. The storms shattered the grand human empire in an instant. Isolated colonies, cut off from civilization, began to regress. Some were destroyed by alien predators, while others vanished entirely. The galaxy descended into chaos. Civil wars erupted, rebellions flared, alien invasions threatened humanity's survival, and it teetered on the brink of extinction. Then, everything changed with the arrival of the Emperor of Mankind. This marked the dawn of a new era, one of unity and resurgence. The Emperor, a figure of unparalleled charisma, vision, and power, united Terra under his rule and forged an alliance with the Mechanicum of Mars. The warp storms subsided, and the pathways of interstellar travel reopened. Under the Emperor's guidance, humanity rebuilt its colonies and expanded its reach across the stars. The Great Crusade, a 200-year-long campaign, began, with the Emperor leading humanity to reclaim its lost glory. It was a time of legends. Lost colonies were reclaimed, alien empires were subjugated or annihilated, and humanity's dominion reached heights unseen since the Golden Age. The Emperor's victories were celebrated on countless worlds, his achievements immortalized in towering monuments and endless proclamations. This was the Imperium's renaissance, heralded by the Emperor's vision and unyielding will. At the forefront of this age were the Primarchs, the Emperor's genetically engineered sons, each a paragon of human potential. These Primarchs commanded the Space Marine legions, elite transhuman warriors capable of defeating entire armies. Thousands of Space Marines marched under the banners of their respective Primarchs, waging war in the Emperor's name. Among them, Horus Lupercal stood above the rest. Known as the War Master, the Emperor's chosen general, and the most trusted of his sons, Horus commanded half of the Imperium's military might. He was a peerless warrior, a masterful strategist, and the architect of countless victories. But his name would forever be entwined with rebellion and treachery. Joe, deep in thought, couldn't help but question the Emperor's decision. Why did the Emperor entrust so much power to Horus? He asked. Even with the utmost respect for the Emperor, wasn't his a mistake? Shouldn't the Emperor have implemented some kind of safeguard for such a massive force? Kayvaan, who had seen the glory and despair of those days, sighed. It's not as simple as it looks, Joe. The Emperor trusted his sons, and Horus was the one he trusted the most. But you need to understand, wars in the Imperium are nothing like wars on Earth. They don't happen on a single planet or even in a single star system. They're expeditions spanning the galaxy, with front lines so far from Terra that central control is practically impossible. Decisions on the battlefield can't wait for orders from home. It's like the old days of Earth's cavalry warfare, where generals had to act without waiting for messengers to return from the capital. Kayvaan paused, letting Joe absorb the comparison, before continuing. Now, replace those horses with starships traveling tens of thousands of light years. That's the reality of interstellar war. Trust in the generals becomes paramount, and Horus was the Emperor's most capable and trusted general. Joe nodded thoughtfully. I see. But did Horus's rebellion succeed? Of course not. Kayvaan's voice was firm, his expression resolute. His Majesty the Emperor is invincible. You doubt this because you haven't seen what I've seen. When you witness the memories of my battles, you'll understand. The Emperor's presence on the battlefield is enough to end any conflict. No force in the universe can stand against him, not even the so-called gods of chaos. Kayvaan's gaze grew distant, his voice softer yet filled with pride. The days when the Emperor led us were unlike anything you can imagine. Victory after victory, glory upon glory, we crushed every alien race in our path. We extinguished every threat before it could take root. Humanity was destined to rule the galaxy. To serve the Emperor wasn't just an honor, it was the greatest privilege any warrior could hope for. Joe leaned closer, intrigued. Is there any proof beyond just stories of how powerful the Emperor really was? Kayvaan smirked, as if the question amused him. Proof? Joe, the Emperor himself is proof. His strength, his will, his vision, those were the pillars that rebuilt humanity. Once you see for yourself, there won't be any room for doubt. Of course, if Horus had won in the end, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Why? Because a normal human body, even mine, with all the surgical modifications, can't last thousands of years without falling apart. If my body hadn't been preserved in the sanctum of the honored dead, we'd have been doomed long ago. Kayvaan paused as if to gauge Joe's reaction. Noticing Joe's lingering curiosity, he continued before Joe could ask another question. As for knowledge about the sanctum, you'll have the chance to look into it yourself later. Right now, let's put the books aside and focus on something that actually matters. Something that matters? Joe tilted his head in confusion. Chapter 8, Kayvaan teaching. Yes, something truly useful, Kayvaan replied. In an instant, a massive suit of jet black Mark X power armor materialized over his body. From his fists, razor-sharp claws known as Raven's talons extended, glinting ominously. The most useful thing in a universe this dangerous is fighting. Without another word, Kayvaan lunged at Joe. For someone so large, his speed was terrifying. Before Joe could even register what was happening, the steel claws had pierced his chest. A searing cold spread from the wound, quickly followed by a wave of suffocating weakness. Death's grip tightened around him. "Why?" Joe gasped, his voice barely audible. "Don't look at me like that," Kayvaan said casually, retracting his claws as if nothing had happened. "I was just saying hello. Didn't expect you to be this fragile, though. It's disappointing, especially considering the wealth of combat techniques buried in your memory. Anyway, get up." The sensation of dying vanished as quickly as it had come. Joe scrambled to his feet, clutching his chest in disbelief. I'm fine?" "Of course, you are," Kayvaan said nonchalantly. "We're in a spiritual space. Your body isn't real here, so a blade can't actually harm you." "But it felt so real," Joe protested. "The pain, the cold, the sense of death creeping closer," Kayvaan replied, shrugging. "Those weren't your feelings, they were mine. I shared one of my past experiences with you. Remember that sensation and learn to avoid it, because in reality, it won't end so nicely. That's what we're working toward." "Wait," Joe asked, still shaken. "You've actually had your heart pierced before?" "Yeah," Kayvaan said with a faint smirk. "It was during a brutal battle. If not for the surgery that gave me 2 hearts, I wouldn't have made it off that hellish world alive. Enough about me, though. Let's talk about you. You're alarmingly weak. Your reflexes, mental fortitude, and combat experience are all practically non-existent. How is that even possible? I've seen incredible fighting techniques in your memories, and your world seems to pride itself on martial arts." Joe coughed awkwardly. "Those might be from some novels. Fictional stories. I'm more of a pacifist, honestly." "That won't do," Kayvaan said firmly. "Pacifism is a luxury you can't afford. In this galaxy, peace is just the pause between wars. Luckily for you, we have plenty of time. I'll train you myself. From now on, you'll call me Captain." "What are you planning to?" "Careful with your tone, apprentice," Kayvaan cut in. Joe sighed. "All right, Captain. What are you planning to do? You're too weak, and weakness has no value to the Imperium. If you want to replace me one day, I'll need to train you, teach you how to fight, survive, and serve the God Emperor properly. You're lucky, not everyone gets to learn from me. Let's start with the basics, understanding our weapons." The massive armor vanished from Kayvaan's body, replaced by a simpler, more ceremonial set of garb. Raising his hands, he revealed a pair of sleek, razor-sharp claws glinting menacingly under the light. "These are Raven's talons, a weapon crafted by Korax, Primarch of the Raven Guard," he explained, clicking the claws together. A sharp metallic screech echoed through the space, sending shivers down Joe's spine. Sharp, deadly, and perfectly balanced for close-quarters combat. Nothing kills more efficiently. Now that you've seen them, let's move on to training. In the consciousness space, there was no day or night, no concept of time. Kayvaan had initially tried to track it by sheer estimation, but he gave up once his calculations reached 1,000 years. For both him and Joe, time had become irrelevant. They didn't need food or sleep, taking breaks only when exhaustion demanded it, then diving back into relentless training. Joe's studies spanned every aspect of Imperial life. Kayvaan was determined to teach him everything: the Imperium's history, its language, its customs, and its culture. Like a sponge, Joe absorbed this vast trove of knowledge, finding solace in learning amidst the monotony. But the cultural lessons were brief compared to the endless combat drills. Once Kayvaan deemed the academic portion sufficient, he poured his energy into honing Joe's fighting skills. The training was merciless. Joe's body was torn apart countless times, yet he persisted. Over time, the once ordinary man began to grow, both in skill and resolve, under the watchful eye of his captain. At first, Kayvaan only taught Joe how to fight with the Raven's talons. Under relentless and high-pressure training, Joe made significant progress. Gradually, he could withstand Kayvaan's attacks, though not without effort. "Very good," Kayvaan said, his tone laced with approval. "You've grasped the basics of using claws. Although you're slow to learn and, frankly, not very bright, it doesn't matter. We have plenty of time to fix that. Now comes my favorite part. This is still about claws, but what I'm about to teach you is entirely different from what you've learned so far. Pay close attention. These are my true martial arts." "Wait," Joe interrupted, blinking. "Are you saying everything I've learned so far was just the basics?" "Of course," Kayvaan replied without hesitation. The days that followed were a blur of grueling battles and torturous lessons. Only then did Joe begin to grasp how truly formidable Kayvaan was. As the training progressed, this realization deepened. Kayvaan's fighting style defied simple explanation. It wasn't just a collection of techniques, it was an art form born of necessity and perfected on countless battlefields. His movements were precise, ferocious, and efficient, designed to kill with ruthless speed. As Kayvaan often said, "Crows don't waste time tearing open a chest when a single thrust to the heart will do." His combat philosophy mirrored that idea. There were no wasted movements, no unnecessary flair. His attacks were swift and merciless, aimed directly at the enemy's vital points. These techniques, passed down from Korax himself, had been refined in the fires of unending war. Simple. Effective. Deadly. Once the physical training sessions ended, Kayvaan introduced tactical training. Combat literacy is often more important than combat skills, Kayvaan explained as they sparred. Each chapter of the Space Marines has its own traditions and methods of war. For the Raven Guard, our specialty lies in assassination, sabotage, and destruction. We excel at operations behind enemy lines. When the opportunity arises, we strike at the enemy's heart. Decapitation tactics are our bread and butter. There's no need for us to engage in drawn-out battles to prove our strength. Our job is to eliminate the enemy efficiently and vanish into the shadows. Joe nodded, his sweat-drenched face reflecting his growing understanding. Kayvaan continued, his voice steady and commanding. "This is why combat literacy is critical for a Raven Guard. You'll need to know when to strike with purpose and when to bide your time. When to create chaos and when to simply lurk in the shadows, letting your presence gnaw at the enemy's nerves. These decisions are yours to make as a leader, and they won't be easy. You'll often find yourself deep in enemy territory, surrounded on all sides. One wrong move could doom your entire mission. It's not just your life on the line. Your decisions could shape the course of an entire campaign. Brothers will die because of your mistakes. That's why intelligence and careful judgment are non-negotiable." Chapter 9, Too Strong. Joe listened intently, the weight of Kayvaan's words pressing heavily on him. He couldn't argue with the logic. The lessons didn't end there. Kayvaan dove into the darker aspects of their training, the art of extracting information. "Fingers," Kayvaan said matter-of-factly, holding up his hand. "They're one of the most sensitive and fragile parts of the human body. Breaking a finger can shatter a man's will. It's simple and effective. Now, come here and try it on me." Joe didn't hesitate. The chance to hurt his captain, even in training, felt like sweet revenge for all the beatings he'd endured. He grabbed Kayvaan's hand and snapped a finger with a loud crack. The sound was oddly satisfying, and Joe felt a flicker of triumph, until Kayvaan punched him square inches the face. No, no, no. Kayvaan barked as Joe groaned, sprawled on the ground. You're too quick. The enemy won't even feel the pain at that speed. You need to understand, we're not breaking fingers just to hurt someone insignificant. Behind enemy lines, we lack critical intel. The goal is to break their will, make them fear you. Pain is your tool. Now, get up and try again. Slowly this time. Make me feel it. Joe got back on his feet, swallowing his frustration. He grabbed Kayvaan's hand again and applied pressure, slower this time, as instructed. Better, Kayvaan said, grimacing slightly. But you're still too rough. Torture is an art. It requires control and focus. Kayvaan then moved on to psychological tactics. Understanding your enemy's culture and customs can be invaluable. Of course, most of the Emperor's enemies won't live long enough for you to apply that knowledge, but it doesn't hurt to be prepared. Learn what you can about them, even if it feels like a waste of time. Knowledge is power, especially in our line of work. And so, day and night, Joe trained under Kayvaan's relentless guidance. He learned to endure, to fight, and to adapt. With time, he mastered assassination, sabotage, interrogation, intimidation, and even demolitions. He trained in operating and maintaining nearly every type of Imperial power armor, from Mark IV Maximus armor to Terminator armor. By the end of it all, Joe felt confident that he could rival any legendary Imperial agent, or at least, outperform any Hollywood hero, considering none of them had piloted a Thunderhawk gunship. Joe's combat prowess also grew exponentially. His steel claws moved like shadows, their cold gleam as dangerous as a predator's fangs. He could now spar with Kayvaan on equal footing, a testament to how far he'd come. The fighting style of the Raven Guard, lethal and efficient, flowed through him naturally, a blend of agility, stealth, and strength. The first phase of his training was complete. But deep down, Joe knew this was only the beginning. From a tactical perspective, which Kayvaan valued most, Joe exceeded all expectations. Whether analyzing Imperial Tactica manuals or revisiting the battles Kayvaan had fought, Joe consistently offered fresh insights, ideas Kayvaan himself had never considered. What's more, he could articulate his thoughts clearly and logically. I've got to say, you've done well during this period, Kayvaan admitted, nodding in approval. This is all thanks to your excellent teaching, Captain, Joe replied modestly. So, what's next? Well, I don't know, Kayvaan admitted with a sigh. The one enemy he couldn't seem to defeat was back again, boredom. Why don't we start over? Kayvaan suggested. Start over? Joe looked puzzled. I said, let's start over. I'll teach, and you'll learn, Kayvaan clarified. Of course, we'll skip the basics this time. We'll focus entirely on combat. You're still lacking in that area. If you want to inherit my name and this body, you'll need more than just strategy and clever ideas. Strength matters too. After all, I am Kayvaan Shrike. Joe frowned slightly. But I've already managed to hold my ground in our spars, haven't I? Hold your ground? Against me? Kayvaan scoffed. You've got some nerve, kid. Do you really think you can stand toe-to-toe with a Space Marine captain? Don't underestimate me. I'm a warrior forged in the Emperor's light, a servant of the Raven Guard, a battle-tested leader who's crushed enemies across countless war zones. The only reason you've done so well against me is because I've been holding back. As he spoke, Kayvaan seemed to grow taller in Joe's eyes, his presence commanding, his tone more serious. Towering at over 3 meters tall in his full armor, Kayvaan's physique was monstrous yet majestic. In our training sessions, I've been limiting myself, matching your height and strength so the fights would be somewhat fair, Kayvaan continued. But now, in this second round of lessons, I'll be using my original strength and form. Joe sighed, feeling a mix of helplessness and frustration. Lord Shrike, are you trying to teach me, or are you just bored and taking it out on me? At times like this, men shouldn't settle things with words, Kayvaan said, cracking his knuckles. Let the battle speak for itself. And so, the second round of lessons began. The instant the fight started, Joe felt like he'd regressed to that clueless boy from Terra who knew nothing about combat. Under Kayvaan's crushing attacks, he was reduced to a beginner, barely able to hold his ground for even a moment. Each encounter ended with him utterly defeated, slammed into walls, thrown to the ground, or torn apart in some other humiliating fashion. But Kayvaan wasn't just focusing on combat this time. He'd also decided to involve himself in Joe's cultural education. At first, Kayvaan had been indifferent to Joe's studies, letting him roam the vast library to read whatever he fancied. That hands-off approach was now over. Kayvaan, seemingly struck with the joy of being a cultural guide, took it upon himself to start actively teaching Joe. First on the list was language. Thankfully, most of the Imperium used Low Gothic, a common language descended from ancient Terran tongues. Its pronunciation and conversational tone made it relatively straightforward for Joe to pick up. Relatively. For Joe, however, language learning was a nightmare. Back on Terra, English classes in school had been his worst subject. Now, in this strange new galaxy, he was forced to start over again. Still, complaints didn't change the reality. He had to learn. After Low Gothic came High Gothic, a rigid, aristocratic tongue used for formal and religious purposes. It was complex and exhausting, pushing Joe's limits even further. By the time he'd made some progress with the languages, his combat training was still abysmally one-sided. Facing Kayvaan in his true form was like trying to fight a mountain. No matter how much effort Joe put in, he was always completely overpowered. "I don't get it," Joe finally said after being killed for what felt like the 100th time. "I've tried everything I can think of, but there's just no way to beat you. Your strength, speed, and reactions are all leagues above mine. All the techniques you've taught me are about risking everything to take down the enemy before they take you down. How am I supposed to win like this?" Chapter 10, Martial Arts. Kayvaan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You're right. Beating you so easily does feel a bit dull. Let's change things up. From now on, I'll teach you something different, how to get hit." "Get hit?" Joe echoed, confused. "Is that really a skill worth learning?" "Of course it is," Kayvaan said. "If you want to fight effectively, you need to know how to take a hit. Dodging is great, but you can't always rely on it. Sooner or later, you'll get caught. When that happens, knowing how to take the blow can make the difference between survival and death." Joe raised an eyebrow. "Isn't avoiding damage just a matter of being quick on your feet?" "That's part of it," Kayvaan admitted, "but on the battlefield, you'll often find yourself in situations where dodging isn't an option. You need to learn how to absorb hits in a way that minimizes the damage. What posture to take, which part of your body to use, these are crucial. And let's not forget that battles aren't always one-on-one. Most of the time, it's chaos, with enemies coming at you from all sides. Learning how to take damage without losing your ability to fight is an essential skill." Joe sighed again. "I guess that makes sense." "It's supposed to," Kayvaan said with a grin. "Now, let's get started." Kayvaan shrugged. "Although these techniques seem impressive, they're not as useful as you might think. Space Marines don't go into battle wearing casual clothes. We have power armor." Joe nodded, already familiar with the process of donning the sacred Mark 7 Aquila pattern power armor, which required the assistance of servitors or a dedicated Mechanicus Armorium team. Dressing in power armor wasn't a simple task, and Joe had also learned basic rites of maintenance for the armor. Power armor, he knew, was a technological marvel blessed by the machine god, far surpassing the crude exosuits found in certain frontier colonies. These suits didn't just provide unparalleled protection, they enhanced the strength and combat prowess of their wearers through neural interfacing and servo-assisted systems. There's no better defense than power armor, Kayvaan explained. You can't outrun plasma fire or dodge loss beams. The enemy will hit you, no matter how fast you are. When that happens, your only defense is the armor you're wearing. If your power armor holds, you're fine. But if it fails, well, it won't matter where you're hit. The result is usually the same. That's why I always felt techniques like these were of limited use. Still, learning them might give you a chance to survive just a little longer. Thus began Joe's brutal lessons. He learned how to take hits deliberately, deciding whether to sacrifice his secondary heart or a redundant organ when necessary. He mastered how to let a blade pierce him in ways that caused the least damage and how to staunch arterial bleeding when it occurred. Joe was taught to remain calm, even if his insides spilled out, so he could push them back and keep fighting. Thankfully, this training took place in spiritual world, where injuries weren't real, making the process easier to endure. It wasn't long before Joe understood his body intimately and could calculate when and where to take an injury if it meant delivering a decisive blow to his opponent. The training transformed Joe's combat style entirely. Previously, he moved like a slippery eel, evading every strike to remain unharmed. Now, he fought like a berserker, willing to trade blows, trusting in his ability to outlast or outmaneuver his opponent. If an enemy slashed at him, Joe was just as likely to slash back, aiming to end the fight in one desperate exchange. But this new style had its limits. Against a foe like Kayvaan, a Raven Guard captain, it didn't matter how much Joe learned or practiced. Kayvaan's overwhelming power made these techniques almost meaningless. No matter where Kayvaan struck, he could incapacitate Joe instantly. Kayvaan sighed, visibly frustrated. This is a real problem. What am I supposed to do? My body's already in decline, and if I keep pushing... Captain, Joe interjected, curious, what exactly are you worried about? Kayvaan hesitated before answering. My body is... withering. Withering? Joe echoed, startled. Well, not exactly. That's not the right word, Kayvaan admitted. Here's the situation. I can still use my body, but only barely. Through observation, I've noticed something disturbing. My body is slowly becoming ordinary. The gene seed within me is degrading. My osmodula is failing, my Biscopia and Laramann's organ aren't far behind. If this continues, I'll be useless. And if someone as strong as me comes after you, you'll stand no chance in a traditional fight. Why would I have to fight someone stronger than me? Kayvaan chuckled darkly. Because enemies don't wait for you to be ready. They strike when you least expect it. If you want to survive in this galaxy, you must remember two things: always be loyal to the Emperor and serve the Imperium. And second, make yourself strong enough to do so. After brooding for a while, Kayvaan finally came up with an unconventional idea. Let's use the martial arts knowledge in your head. Joe frowned. That's mostly fiction. They're just concepts I've seen in movies and games. I don't know anything about real martial arts. That's fine. A concept is enough. I can build on that. Don't forget, I'm a close combat instructor. I've killed enough enemies to form an entire army. From that moment, Kayvaan began experimenting. He meticulously analyzed every fight scene Joe had ever watched, breaking down moves and techniques to their core elements. He combined these ideas with his own combat experience, refining them into something practical. Once the groundwork was laid, Kayvaan and Joe practiced together. What began as a mentorship relationship evolved into a partnership of mutual learning and discovery. Kayvaan's approach blended the calculated ferocity of a seasoned warrior with the creative flair of imagined techniques. Under his guidance, Joe began to develop a unique style, merging the discipline of a space marine with the ingenuity of a mind unbound by traditional combat norms. Though still far from Kayvaan's level, Joe's growth was undeniable. The lessons were grueling, but for the first time, Joe felt he was carving his own path, a path that might just keep him alive. Kayvaan had always looked down on the ideas that filled Joe's mind. Boxing, karate, and Muay Thai, to him, were nothing more than refined sets of fighting techniques. Sure, when practiced to the point of mastery, martial artists could perform feats that seemed almost magical to ordinary people. But it was no different than a skilled waiter in a Western restaurant pulling a tablecloth from under a fully set table without disturbing the dishes. It might look impressive, even miraculous, but in reality, it was just the product of endless practice, a showy skill with limited practicality. Chapter 11. Last moment. Kayvaan didn't care for such flair. His battles had always been brutal and straightforward, fought on real battlefields. His focus was on killing the enemy as efficiently and quickly as possible. Unlike martial artists who sought to challenge themselves and grow by facing stronger opponents, Kayvaan wasn't interested in tests of skill or endurance. He was a soldier of the Adeptus Astartes, not a mere fighter, a warrior who fought for the survival of humanity and the will of the Emperor. If an enemy was too powerful to handle directly, that's what heavy weapons were for. Call in the orbital bombardment, unleash the wrath of their arsenal, and move on. Because of this, Kayvaan had never bothered delving deeply into the art of defeating stronger opponents through superior technique. He didn't need to. As a Raven Guard Space Marine, enhanced by the Emperor's gene seed, he had always been the stronger one. But now, things were different. Kayvaan could feel the curse creeping through his body, eroding it bit by bit. His once imposing frame, augmented by the sacred rites of the Mechanicus and the gene grafting of Korax, was starting to falter. The Kayvaan Shrike who could tear through enemies and wear power armor like a second skin was disappearing. In the not-so-distant future, he might not even have the physical capability to don such armor. This realization gnawed at him, pushing him to seek solutions, not just for Joe's sake, but for his own survival. What unnerved him even more than the physical decline, however, was the effect the curse was having on his soul. Unlike the agony he'd endured countless times in his life, the curse brought no pain. Instead, it delivered waves of bliss. It felt like sinking into a warm bath, every fiber of his being awash in soothing, intoxicating pleasure. The sensation was addictive, like a drug that promised the Emperor's grace but demanded everything in return. For Kayvaan, this was far worse than pain. Pain was a companion of every Astartes, a tool of focus, a sharp reminder of their purpose. But pleasure? Pleasure threatened to dull his edge, to erode his resolve. It was a battle unlike any he'd fought before. He was no stranger to struggles, but this constant temptation felt like fighting against himself, a veteran of countless campaigns wrestling with a foe that could not be killed. He had to keep his mind busy, his hands occupied. He couldn't afford even a moment of stillness, lest the curse drag him deeper into its abyss. He clung to his iron will, convinced that if he could resist long enough, the curse would weaken with his soul. Even as his strength faded, he believed his conviction would hold. He studied everything: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, renowned for its mastery of grappling and submissions; Muay Thai, the art of 8 limbs, with its devastating strikes using fists, elbows, knees, and shins; Krav Maga, a no-nonsense combat system forged for real-world survival; boxing, with its unmatched footwork and striking power; karate, blending explosive strikes with disciplined technique; judo, which turns an opponent's strength against them through throws and joint blocks; and kung fu, emphasizing fluidity, balance, and versatility in both offense and defense. These techniques aren't completely useless, Kayvaan admitted one day. Fighting boils down to 3 things: strength, speed, and skill. Of the 3, skill can sometimes turn the tide in a fight. But without strength and speed to back it up, skill alone has its limits. With strength and speed, though, you barely need skill at all. Mastering advanced techniques takes too much time for too little payoff, especially for ordinary people. Joe, listening intently, couldn't help but ask, "So, have you mastered them yet, Captain?" Kayvaan shook his head. "I understand the principles, But I'm far from mastery. I can teach you, though. Given enough time, you'll figure it out. He continued, the essence of martial arts, at least in your country, lies in the mastery of force. It's about harnessing the full power of your body in an instant and striking the enemy at their weakest point. That's the core of techniques like inch force, soft force, and redirection. In war or combat, it's always the same: use your strongest blow to hit the enemy where they're weakest. Kayvaan's tone turned wistful. But it's a shame. What's the shame? These techniques are impressive, no doubt, but they'll never see widespread use. Skills like these are meant for the weak, for those who need every edge to defeat a stronger opponent. The strong don't rely on tricks, they just need to become stronger. That's why our warriors have little use for such things. The days passed in a blur of practice and study. Kayvaan and Joe devoted themselves entirely to the training. Despite his initial skepticism, Joe began learning what Kayvaan considered the least useful skill of all: single soldier unarmed combat. To Kayvaan, losing one's weapons in battle was almost unthinkable. If it came to that, death was likely imminent, and unarmed combat wouldn't save you. But still, they trained. It was a way to fill the hours, to keep the curse at bay for just a little longer. And for Kayvaan, it was a means to leave something behind, a legacy of skill and survival in a galaxy that seemed determined to take everything from him. Joe had always been deeply interested in this course. When the fourth round of lessons concluded, he surprised everyone by achieving outstanding results. After the last class, Kayvaan patted Joe on the shoulder with a smile and said, "I have nothing more to teach you. You've been the slowest learner among all my students, but in the end, you've become the best. Don't interrupt, just listen. In truth, I owe you my thanks. Because of you, even in these dark times, I've managed to hold on to my humanity. You've kept me from succumbing to despair. And now, I can leave this galaxy without regrets, knowing that even if my soul fades, you'll carry on my name and serve the Imperium. You've given me the courage to make this decision." Joe's expression shifted as Kayvaan continued. "It's time for me to say goodbye, once and for all. From now on, you are Kayvaan Shrike. Honor this name, and never bring it shame." "Captain, you..." "Stop," Kayvaan interrupted, his smile bittersweet. "What's that look on your face? Don't be sad. In this galaxy, those who leave aren't necessarily the unfortunate ones, and those who stay aren't always the lucky ones. I've lived too long, fought too many battles. Now, it's time for me to face my final challenge, against an enemy more powerful than anything I've encountered. I've run from this fight for too long, but no more. This battle has always been inevitable." Kayvaan's gaze turned stern as he added, "Remember, when the time comes, just watch. No matter what happens, do not intervene. This fight belongs to me alone. May the Emperor guide you, and may he grant me his protection." With those words, Kayvaan raised his hand, activating a teleport homer linked to the Raven Guard's strike cruiser. A shimmering light enveloped him, and he stepped through without hesitation, vanishing from sight. Chapter 12, Mysterious Woman. The world around Joe began to unravel. The floor crumbled beneath him, the walls disintegrated into dust, and the ceiling dissolved, exposing the endless void of the warp above. Soon, even the sky itself seemed to peel away, leaving Joe weightless, suspended in a void. He looked down and saw a vast plain stretching endlessly in all directions. The earth below wasn't brown or green, but a horrifying patchwork of corpses, humans, xenos, and unidentifiable monstrosities, covered the ground like a grotesque carpet. Blood pooled and congealed in rivers across the battlefield, staining everything a deep, sickening red. Joe's heart pounded as he took in the horrifying scene. "Is this hell?" he whispered. "It's not wrong to call it that," came Kayvaan's voice, steady but grim. "But it's also not entirely right. This is a battlefield in the warp. Soon, a battle will rage here, one that will decide everything. The enemy is unimaginably powerful, And I must give everything I have to face it. Joe, listen to me carefully. Stay true to your heart. Don't let chaos tempt you. Her words are poison, and they'll seep into your soul if you aren't careful. Whatever you do, don't believe her. Her? Chaos? What do you mean? Joe asked, his voice trembling. A sultry voice cut through the air, dripping with charm. Chaos? Such a simplistic word. Joe's gaze was drawn to the plain below as the corpses began to shift and rise, forming a grotesque mound. From the center of the heap, a hexagonal crystal platform emerged, glittering ominously. At its center stood a magnificent golden throne encrusted with dazzling jewels. Around the edges of the platform, 6 corners displayed something so mesmerizing, it rooted Joe to the spot. The first corner was a pile of treasures, gold coins spilling like water, massive rubies, opals, and diamonds glinting in the faint light. A golden idol stood among them, radiating a hypnotic allure. The second corner held a long banquet table laden with food and drink beyond imagination, succulent roasts, fresh fish, soft bread, and wines that sparkled in the light. Each dish exuded an irresistible aroma, and just as one plate vanished, a new, even more enticing one appeared in its place. The third corner was filled with young men and women chained by their necks. Their flawless skin and seductive movements seemed designed to ignite desire. Every glance, every motion, exuded an intoxicating allure that tugged at the deepest recesses of the mind. The other 3 corners were obscured by thick, swirling mist, their contents hidden from view. Atop the golden throne sat a woman, her presence as intoxicating as it was commanding. Her elegant frame was draped in a black silk dress that clung to her like a second skin, its sheer fabric revealing tantalizing glimpses of the flesh beneath. Her deep, gentle eyes seemed to draw in the very soul, and her smile was both comforting and dangerous. She leaned back, her voice like honey. How childish it is to divide the galaxy into 2 simple sides, loyalty and heresy, justice and evil. Only the naive see the world so simplistically. Adults understand that life is shades of gray, driven by personal interests. Don't you agree, Kayvaan? Kayvaan's voice was sharp and unwavering. Enough of your games, demon. I won't be swayed by your words. The woman laughed softly, her tone almost pitying. You're such a hypocrite, Kayvaan. How long have you been running from me? Hiding behind your walls, plugging your ears, pretending I don't exist? I've waited so long, knocking at your door like a forgotten child, and you've ignored me every time. And now that we meet at last, you spew these harsh words at me? You fear me, don't you? Because deep down, you know I speak the truth. Kayvaan's fists clenched. It's true. Once, I couldn't stand against you. My heart was too full of weakness, of desire. But not anymore. This ends now. Stop using that word, it's ridiculous and makes me laugh. The woman in the black robe waved her hand dismissively. You talk about heresy and loyalty as if they mean something, but those ideas crumble under scrutiny. They're hollow concepts that fall apart the moment you think too deeply about them. But why waste time on such boring things? Look around you, at the wealth, the shimmering gold, the dazzling jewels. This is treasure beyond what most mortals could dream of possessing in a lifetime. And yet, it's yours for the taking. Kayvaan, you've fought for the Imperium through life and death. You've dedicated your entire existence to protecting humanity, shielding them from alien horrors, exterminating countless alien races. Without you, how many would have been torn apart or reduced to fodder for their machines? And what did you get for your sacrifices? Nothing. Nothing but a pile of broken armor. After all you've done, all you've suffered, you stand here empty-handed? Her voice was laced with sorrow, though her expression betrayed a certain cruelty. The lords of the Imperium? They're lounging in their palaces, drinking priceless amisk and gorging themselves. They exploit the poor, stash unimaginable wealth in secret vaults, and use their positions to indulge in every vile desire. And the governors? She laughed bitterly. They're worse than animals, taking any they please and killing anyone who dares displease them. They act like gods, but even gods have rules. These men are worse. And their children, their descendants, will inherit this power and continue the cycle of tyranny. This is the system you've dedicated your life to defending. Are these truly the people you're risking everything for? Kayvaan stood firm, his voice calm but resolute. It's my duty. I haven't given my life for nothing. I've earned honor in my service, and I hold faith in my heart. Honor? Faith? The woman scoffed, her smile twisting into one of condescension. Those medals. Those scraps of iron they pin on your chest? They're meaningless trinkets, Kayvaan. And as for faith? She chuckled, shaking her head as if addressing a naive child. You're fooling yourself. You have nothing. Kayvaan's gaze sharpened, his voice edged with cold defiance. And what can you offer me that's any different? Her lips curved into a sly smile. What do you desire? Wealth? I have that in abundance. She walked to a towering pile of gold coins, letting a handful slip through her fingers. The coins clinked and shimmered as they fell. Listen to that sound. Isn't it beautiful? All of this could be yours. I can give you more wealth than you could ever spend. You could live in a palace of gold, Kayvaan. Even your weapons could be gilded, if you wished. Cheap illusions, Kayvaan sneered. They're meaningless. Illusions? Perhaps, the woman admitted with a slight tilt of her head. But feel them, touch them. These gold coins, these gems, they're indistinguishable from the real thing. The weight, the texture, the sound, they bring the same pleasure and satisfaction. Why concern yourself with whether something is real or not? Isn't enjoyment enough? Her eyes glinted with malice, but Kayvaan met her gaze with a derisive smile, full of mockery. Her tone shifted suddenly, taking on a seductive lilt. Ah, I see. Money doesn't move you. How about food, then? Here, try this. She gestured to an ornate table laden with dishes. This is the belly meat of a sea beast from an ocean death world. The finest cut. And this wine? She held up a crystal goblet, swirling its dark liquid. The aroma alone is intoxicating. To live without tasting something this divine, it's a tragedy, Kayvaan. I eat to live, nothing more, Kayvaan said coldly. And I live to serve the God Emperor. Chapter 13. Who I am. The woman clucked her tongue in mock pity. Such a bleak existence. How have you survived so long without joy? Her voice dropped, growing sultry. What about women? Look at these girls. Their skin is soft, their bodies eager. They long for you, Kayvaan. They ache for your touch. They'll let you do anything, to them. Or perhaps. Her smile turned wicked. You prefer men? I can offer you them as well. Their bodies, their moans, their submission, all for your pleasure. Shut your mouth, you wretched creature, Kayvaan growled, his gauntleted hands clenching. With a metallic click, razor-sharp claws extended from his gloves. Your twisted offers are wasted on me. I have no interest in your lies or your perversions. Stop stalling and pick up your weapon. The woman sighed, her expression momentarily mournful. Not interested, are you? Such a shame. She seemed to think for a moment, then clapped her hands. Ah, I know. She exclaimed, her face lighting up with cruel delight. A figure stepped out from the shadows behind her throne. What about her, Kayvaan? Your old lover. You've missed her, haven't you? Kayvaan froze, his breath catching in his throat. The woman continued, her voice soft and venomous. How many times did you watch her, wondering what was hidden beneath her robes? How many nights did you lie awake, consumed by thoughts of her? Wasn't that why you left her, to escape the temptation? Because you knew, deep down, you couldn't trust yourself? And now, here she is. She's waiting for you, Kayvaan. She wants you. Take her. For a long moment, Kayvaan stood motionless, his face a mask of horror. His expression twisted into despair, then fury. Finally, He snarled through gritted teeth, "No. This is your game, demon. You'll get nothing from me." The woman in the black robe spoke with words sharper than any blade, her voice effortlessly piercing through Kayvaan's defenses. "Look at you, poor child," she said, descending from the throne with an unnerving grace. Her feet barely seemed to touch the crystal steps as she approached him. When she reached him, she gently stroked his head, her voice soft and maternal, almost tender. "It's heartbreaking, really. You're so sad, and it's no wonder. You already know, don't you? What you saw, it's all a lie, an illusion crafted to distract you from the truth. Your old lover is gone, Kayvaan. She died a long time ago while you were out in the galaxy, fighting endless wars, exterminating Xenos, destroying everything in your path to protect humanity. You were unstoppable in battle, but time doesn't stop for anyone. Not for you. Not for her." Her words hung heavy in the air as she crouched to his level, her tone almost soothing, like a lullaby meant to break his spirit. "You are enhanced, a product of the Emperor's will, untouched by time." But she wasn't. She grew older, Kayvaan. She aged. And then she passed away. Alone. Do you know how much she loved you? Her entire life, she never married, never found happiness. She cried herself to sleep more nights than I can count, dreaming of you. That was her only comfort during her long, lonely nights. She wanted to feel close to you, even if it was just in her mind. She'd lay in bed and imagine you there beside her. That fantasy was her only solace. But when she'd open her eyes, all she found was emptiness. And now, that's all you have left of her, emptiness and regret. Her once radiant skin withered, her laughter faded, and she died lonely, thinking of the man who was never there. Kayvaan, the towering giant who had always been calm, strong, and untouchable, suddenly crumbled. He dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as his crow's claws fell to the ground with a hollow clang. The unyielding man who had never known fear now shook like a leaf in a storm. "No. No. You're lying. Lies." His voice cracked, and the power armor that once shielded him began to peel away, piece by piece, revealing the vulnerable man beneath. The woman's lips curled into a twisted smile. "You know I'm not lying, Kayvaan. You know my power, you know I only speak the truth. This is the reality you've been running from, a tragedy of two souls who loved each other but were kept apart by meaningless rules and empty morals. What's so wrong about love? Even forbidden love? It's society's chains that made you suffer, made her suffer. And for what? Those same noble lords who fought to protect indulge in far worse behind closed doors. Some even take their thralls to bed." Her voice turned honeyed, almost seductive. "So why shouldn't you indulge in what brings you happiness? Why torment yourself for rules that only serve to hurt you?" Kayvaan's breathing grew shallow, his chest heaving as the weight of her words sank deeper into his mind. "No. No. It's my fault. All of it," he whispered, his voice hollow. His once mighty frame seemed to shrink under the crushing burden of guilt and despair. From his vantage point in the air, Joe watched helplessly. He tried to scream, to warn Kayvaan, but no sound escaped his lips. His mind raced back to Kayvaan's words before the battle began. Kayvaan had known this would happen. This was his fight, and no one could interfere. The woman in the black robe pressed on, her voice dripping with false compassion. "You see now, don't you? The so-called morality, justice, and laws, they're nothing but shackles. You've given everything, Kayvaan, yet you've been left with nothing. Why not take what you deserve? Why not embrace the pleasure and freedom you've denied yourself for so long? You've sacrificed everything, but it's time to let go. Enjoy life. You've earned that much, haven't you?" Kayvaan's head hung low, his hands clutching the ground as though he might fall through it. Then, his shoulders shook, not with despair, but with a deep, guttural laugh. Slowly, he raised his head, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You know. You almost had me, he said through gritted teeth. But unfortunately for you, it's all nonsense. With a burst of strength, Kayvaan sprang to his feet like a coiled spring. His power armor was gone, his weapons stripped away, but his faith was unshaken. The crow's claws, hidden within his very being, erupted from his fists, tearing through his skin and gleaming with deadly intent. Before the woman could react, Kayvaan lashed out. One clawed hand sliced clean through her neck, sending her head flying. His other hand plunged into her chest, the claws ripping into her heart and twisting mercilessly. He stirred the organ like a wild animal tearing apart prey, reducing it to pulp. In the span of seconds, the black-robed woman's body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Kayvaan stepped back, yanking his blood-soaked claws free and kicking her body away with disgust. "I told you," he snarled, his voice low and venomous. "Your little tricks don't work on me. Now, tell me your name, demon. Let's see just how close you want to get." However, as if nothing had happened, another identical woman in a black robe emerged on the throne. She looked down at him, her voice dripping with mockery. What an unexpected result. He truly lives up to his reputation as one of the Raven Guard. You are not to be underestimated. But tell me, Kayvaan, don't you recognize who I am? Chapter 14, Against Slaanesh. Kayvaan's eyes narrowed. "I'm not familiar with you demons at all." She laughed, a sound both chilling and strangely familiar. "But I know you, Kayvaan. I know every fragrant dream you've had, every bit of pain, anger, and resentment buried in your heart. Everything about you is laid bare before me. Can't you guess who I am? When you resisted the curse, I slipped into your soul. Everything since then has unfolded exactly as I planned, without a single misstep." Her lips curled into a smile that sent shivers down his spine. "Some call me Salish. Others call me Shalish. To some, I am the Dark Prince, the one they name Slaanesh. But here, you should know me by another name. I am you. Just like two sides of the same coin, the curse of chaos feeds me power, and the darkness within your heart is the soil where I thrive. I am you, Kayvaan Shrike, and you are me. We are one and the same. I know all your desires, I feel your pain, your rage, and your joy. I mourn when you mourn, and I revel in your madness. We are not enemies. We are kin. You're saying you're my other side? That I have a demon hidden inside me?" Kayvaan's voice was steady, but his eyes were sharp, scrutinizing every word. "There's a demon hidden in everyone's heart, Kayvaan. It just depends on how you name it. Desire is part of being human. Imagine a person without any wants or needs, someone who cannot love or hate, who doesn't feel the sting of jealousy or the satisfaction of victory. That person would be as cold as ice, emotionless and hollow. Could they even be considered human? What would be the purpose of their existence? You admire the so-called virtuous, don't you? But think about it. The emperor you revere turned you into a killing machine, a tool for his conquests and grand ambitions. I, on the other hand, want to help you find your true self. To be someone who knows love, who enjoys life. To become real." Kayvaan's jaw tightened. "Everyone has desires, but what matters is whether I control them or they control me. You're cunning, demon, but you can't shake my resolve. When I guard my heart, everything is decided. No matter how much you talk, it changes nothing." He stepped forward, each stride deliberate as he ascended the crystal stairs leading to the throne. Bodies lay scattered on either side, and blood stained his boots, but he moved forward without hesitation. The black-robed woman tilted her head, her smile widening. "How ridiculous. I already told you, I am you. How can you kill me? We are inseparable. Every time you pierce my chest with a blade, you weaken yourself. If I die, so do you. Then we'll die together." Kayvaan roared, his voice echoing in the vast hall. He charged up the stairs, ignoring the golden treasures and lavish feasts that appeared in his path. When beautiful young women emerged to block his way, he didn't hesitate, his claws slicing through them like paper. Their bodies fell in pieces, staining the stairs crimson. But then a familiar figure stepped into his path, a beautiful woman, her face so achingly familiar it stopped him in his tracks. Kayvaan. Please, stop. She cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. You're scaring me. I don't even recognize you anymore. Please, come back. Be the Kayvaan who loved me. Kayvaan stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. You do look like her, he said softly. But you're not her. Without hesitation, he thrust his claws forward, piercing her chest. His sharp talons tore through her body with brutal precision, ripping her apart as blood and flesh rained down the stairs. Her severed head rolled to the ground, coming to a stop against a step. Kayvaan didn't even glance at it. He continued upward. The woman on the throne shook her head, her expression one of mock regret. Look at yourself. You killed even your lover without a second thought. And yet you still think you're different from me? Between the two of us, who's more like a demon now? Turn back, Kayvaan. There's still time. Her words were cut short as Kayvaan lunged. His claws plunged into her eyes, tearing through her skull with relentless force. Blood spattered as he dragged the blades downward, splitting her body from head to groin. Her form crumpled, torn apart like a grotesque work of art. A chilling laugh echoed. What a pity. I really didn't want to resort to barbarism, Kayvaan. But you left me no choice. The corpses scattered across the ground began to stir. One by one, they rose, their forms shifting until they all resembled her, Slaanesh. Each one bore a twisted weapon as they swarmed toward Kayvaan. Yet, none could match him. He moved like a storm, his claws tearing through them in a whirlwind of silver. The air filled with the sound of ripping flesh and the clang of broken weapons. Dismembered limbs and pools of blood painted a grim battlefield as countless versions of Slaanesh fell, only for more to rise again. The massacre dragged on, time losing all meaning. It became an eternal slaughter, a never-ending nightmare. No one could say how long Kayvaan fought, minutes, hours, days. It felt like forever. To anyone watching, it seemed as though the earth itself gave rise to the dead, only for them to be cut down again. When it finally ended, Kayvaan stood atop the mountain of corpses, his steel claws glinting in the dim light, his body drenched in blood. He looked like a demon himself, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. You'll never beat me, demon. He roared, his voice shaking the ground. This is my mind, my soul, my territory. I am invincible here. I'm sick of your tricks, come out and face me. You're insane, her voice hissed as she emerged from the mound of bodies. The once elegant, otherworldly beauty on her face was gone, replaced by feral rage and bitterness. You think you've won? You can't defeat me. I am you. I know your every move, every thought, every strength. How can a man beat himself? Kayvaan raised his claws, his grin as sharp as the weapons he wielded. Then show me how strong I really am. Slaanesh smiled coldly, raising her hands. Her nails grew unnaturally long, gleaming like blades. You're not smart, Kayvaan, but I'll admit you're strong. The air thickened with tension as they faced each other. They didn't need words, both knew that ordinary combat wouldn't decide this fight. They were too alike, each knowing the other's strategies and thoughts. So, they abandoned all subtlety, diving headfirst into brutal, primal violence. They collided like forces of nature. Kayvaan's claws punched through her chest, his fist gripping something inside as he pulled her close. At the same time, her claws pierced his ribs, holding him in an iron grip. Neither flinched. They locked themselves in a grotesque embrace, each staring into the other without hesitation. His claws ripped, sliced, and gouged, turning her flesh into shredded pulp. Her claws dug and tore her with equal savagery, peeling muscle from bone in an attempt to dismantle him. They struck with fists, claws, knees, and even teeth, as though they were mortal enemies locked in a fight to the death. Blood splattered across the battlefield, staining their already ruined bodies. Chapter 15, Awaken to the onlooker. It was both mesmerizing and horrifying, a fight so close and vicious it blurred the line between combat and self-destruction. Minutes passed, or perhaps centuries. Their movements slowed as exhaustion seeped into their broken forms, but neither stopped. Enough. Slaanesh's voice broke through the chaos. Her tone, once commanding, now carried a desperate edge. Kayvaan, stop. Please, I beg you. If we go on, we'll both die. Why are you doing this? What has the false emperor done to make you so insane? Kayvaan didn't answer. His actions were mechanical, like a machine. He raised his arm and drove his claws into her again. Stop, please. She screamed. Why are you so stubborn? You're human, Kayvaan. No matter what they turn you into, deep down, you're just a man. You're tired, aren't you? Exhausted. Why not give in and rest? He ignored her, lifting his arm with difficulty. The claws plunged into her once more. Think about it, she gasped. Eternal happiness, even if false, would feel real. What's more terrifying, being trapped in a dream you never wake from or living in a nightmare you can never escape? Kayvaan struggled but forced his arm up again, his claws driving into her body. Why do this to yourself? Reality is dark, bloody, and full of pain. You've seen it. You've lived it. Don't you want peace? Again, he raised his arm, slower this time, and pierced her flesh. You're insane, she whispered, her voice faltering. I'm dead, and you can't live either. Your soul is on the brink of dissolving. So tell me, how can you claim victory? Across from him, she rose to her feet. The scars across her body were horrific, as if she'd been through a blender. Torn and mangled, yet, shockingly, her wounds were healing at an unnatural speed. Kayvaan remained calm, unfazed by the grotesque sight. His voice was steady, resolute. You don't understand. A demon like you could never grasp the essence of an Adeptus Astartes. We give up everything, our ordinary lives, our comforts, for one purpose, to protect humanity. Being Astartes is about dedication. It's about sacrifice, not gain or possession. She laughed, her smile twisted and eerie. So you sacrificed yourself to take me down with you? Her tone was mocking. And for what? So your pitiful apprentice can inherit your broken body and your legacy, only to keep serving your false emperor? His eyes narrowed slightly. How do you know about him? She tilted her head, her grin widening as if savoring some private joke. Ha 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 ha. I told you, everything is going exactly as expected. No exceptions. Her tone grew sharper, yet more amused. Your poor little apprentice, he's not like you, is he? He's just a regular human. Do you honestly think he can resist all those temptations? Money, indulgence, lust, power, vanity, all those sweet things mortals crave? He'll crumble, Kayvaan. He'll fall sooner or later. Sure, you've won this battle. I'll vanish with you. But the real game? It's only just begun, and you won't be around to see it. Kayvaan coughed, blood trickling from his mouth, but his gaze remained unwavering. I believe in him. He is my best apprentice. Flawed, yes, but kind. And as long as he holds on to that kindness, he'll endure. Her expression twisted into something dark and angry, her voice rising in frustration. And what did you get from all this, Kayvaan? Yes, you won, but at what cost?